Hello. Right now, the world media is filled with one thing. What rearrangements is Trump making and what will come of it? However, significant things are happening in the world, simultaneously and in connection with this. What needs to be mentioned is that it shows what is happening in the world. The first is that the trial of Marine Le Pen in France has been ongoing for 2 months now. And here it has surfaced in the headlines and is approaching its conclusion. What is the actual leader of the National Rally, formerly the National Front, Marine Le Pen, being tried for? For money laundering of European Parliament funds. How did she launder European Parliament funds? She took this position at the beginning of 2012, when her father said, "I am tired, I am old and sick, you take over." And she made it much more acceptable, so to speak, and tolerable compared to her father, who was quite radical in this movement. And at that time, such a moment was flourishing. All members, that is, all deputies of the European Parliament, received money for their assistants, to hire assistants, pay them, and the assistants helped them. In total, a deputy received approximately 20,000 euros each month for their assistants. And many, in fact, spent this not on hiring an assistant who would only work for the European Parliament. Well, they hired and paid for various types of assistants, but which might not completely match. In particular, 1 or 2 deputies from the organization, from the National Association of Marine Le Pen, receiving 20,000 euros a month, used this money to hire, that is, to pay for typists, drivers, couriers, and others who worked for the European Parliament, but essentially worked for this party. That's the story. It was a common practice in 2016. The French Parliament passed a law stating that this cannot be done, that it is not targeted spending, and that, all hired individuals must work exclusively in the interests of the European Parliament without being distracted by anything else. In 2016, this practice ended, as Marine Le Pen had to be targeted because she performed very well in the recent elections, first in the European Parliament, and then, if it weren't for Macron's tactics, they would have taken. The French Parliament actually brought this to light, and indeed extended the accusation that they were doing this even in 2016, after the date of the law's adoption. If they had stopped a little earlier, the law would not have retroactive effect. It was necessary to pull hard by the hair and ears to ensure it was the same afterward. Thus, the entire party was initially charged 4 million euros. Then, 3 million, but as a result, the figure was reduced to a claim of 2 million euros. These 2 million euros, which were paid by the European Parliament, yes, all according to accounting, all by documents, were precisely for the assistants, typists, and so on, who actually worked for the party, not for the European Parliament. This is what they are being incriminated for. There are 9 accountants, and others, and so on. And from this, without going into details, they arranged it. They are laundering money. Because if the current government of America, the one from January 20, extends a hand of friendship to the corresponding movements in Europe, you understand, these socialist governments are all scheming. Therefore, they need to try to bury whoever they can. They are trying to bury Marine Le Pen. But there are enough lawyers there. It will take a long time, and it seems they will not be able to bury her at all. They already attempted to incriminate her 10 years ago for spreading and calling for terror. She was accused of terrorism, and she posted a photo on her website, taken from open access on the internet. The body lies in the corresponding warm regions, and on the head, on the chest of the body, is the head, with the inscription, "This is what terrorism is." So, although the photo was floating in open access, she was accused of publishing it. Well, where they intruded, there the investigations were wiped out. So this is regarding beautiful France. there is also serious Germany, where the Alternative for Germany party has had enough of the socialists and all these traffic light greens, the spineless, because it has more and more supporters, despite being declared indecent, being called neo-fascist, all sorts of derogatory terms, indeed, all lies. Anyone can type Alternative for Germany program in the search bar and easily read it in open access. There is absolutely nothing there that could be subjected to any condemnation, at least to some extent. Yes, it says that Germans should still remain Germans, and that migrants need to be well filtered, and so on. However, the party cannot be dissolved for this, but they have already gathered 123 signatures in the Bundestag to ban it. And these communist fascist methods, namely to prohibit or ban political opponents that are disliked, such as those who challenge the status quo and declare them illegal or even, in some cases, illegitimate. They declare it democracy, while those who work completely democratically are labeled neo-fascists. These are the modern monsters who declare themselves defenders of democracy, while in reality being usurpers striving for dictatorship. They have already learned to silence others. This is how they have stirred in Germany, otherwise Germany may receive an outstretched hand of friendship. All these two candies, Merkel and now Scholz, are quite memorable. And this is what is happening in the world. Well, the first to speak was Netanyahu. A person, despite his age, has absolutely remarkable reactions. The official election results in America had not yet been announced, and he finally dismissed. His Minister of Defense, Yoav Gallant, he took a long time to decide, almost dismissed him once. 6 months ago, no, more than a year ago, it was, I think, March 2023, crowds came out in defense, brought him back. What's the deal with the Israeli generals? The thing is that Israeli generals, through the Wexner Foundation, there is such a foundation, its creator and owner, a billionaire, lives in Albany. There is such a foundation, which I think has no significance, but it, I think, has no significance. A wonderful and famous city, you know, Vagayo. He created such a center to generally and ideologically develop Jewish leaders, both in the United States and in Israel. There is also a branch of this foundation in Jerusalem. There is a scholarship fund as a subdivision. And so the Israeli military of the middle, indeed actually above the middle level, senior officers up to generals, they studied for these scholarships. Where exactly did they study? It is called the prestigious John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University, located in Cambridge, Massachusetts. They were not only given knowledge about Jewish history and the like, but they were also instilled with modern skills such as worldviews, ideologies, and methods, so that they could better respond to all challenges. And the doctrine was truly very interesting indeed in this wonderful school, this wonderful foundation. It was based on the idea that democratically elected governing bodies, democratically, that is, the government and parliament, cannot competently manage the state on their own. Well, these elected officials, you know, they are generally from another profession. What is needed are professional bureaucrats, managers, professional top managers of state and private corporations, starting from some firms and ending with the government. And they will actually be in charge, directing these people. Well, and at the same time occupying all these positions. Here are the generals. And the Israeli generals went through this wonderful year-long school. Former Chief of Staff Avi in Kachav, Deputy Chief of Staff Amir Baram, and Commander of the Southern Military District Yaron Pinkelman all went through it. All of them are generals, of course, generals. Well, when on October 7th, 1923, demonstrations and some riots began in support of Palestine and strictly against Israel and everything Jewish, this wonderful foundation severed ties. With Harvard University, I wonder, for how long? This is where the roots of the wonderful top of the Israeli army come from, where one needs to have the right views to become a general. Their right views led to the entire tragedy of October 7th. In principle, with these views, one can end up at the firing wall. Well, excuse me, what am I saying? So, this is what Netanyahu is doing. They oppose the judicial reform. And since, in fact, the Supreme Court wants to rule Israel, the professional officials are irreplaceable. And the top of the army completely agrees with him. So, in essence, there is a somewhat hidden dual power in Israel which tries to place its authority over the elected power of the people, over the government and the parliament, over the Knesset, to make it clear to everyone. Otherwise, there is an extraordinary number of idiots. What is Ukraine talking about? Ukraine is talking about what Trump will do. Perhaps. So, there is a feeling that the real tomorrow and the day after tomorrow do not interest Ukrainian bloggers and journalists. What will Biden do in the next 2 months? There is no such discussion. What are Biden's plans? Maybe he will give a lot of money and a lot of weapons, making it harder for Trump to sort things out later. But the most important thing is, what will Trump do? Will he negotiate with Russia or not? How? Will he give anything to Ukraine or not? How will Trump react to this? How will Biden react to this? It is not being discussed, just as it was not discussed before. This is very, very interesting. It's interesting, guys. Money, instructions, all of this is, of course, conspiracy theory, but what do you guys have in your heads? There was such a brave song in Soviet times. Well, in conclusion, a few words, of course, about the native Russian position, the liberal, democratic, well-thinking, and so on. There is a completely big scandal there, its own discussion, because Schlossberg went for an interview with Sobchak, and there he stated that Ukraine is not a victim because it is resisting and is also armed. And in general, when you identify yourself with a country, your whole body hurts anyway, regardless of whether that body intruded into someone else's territory or if someone intruded into it, it still hurts. We will not discuss this interview now. I wanted to mention only 2 things. First, you cannot go to Sobchak and you cannot approach Sobchak. This phenomenon is absolutely disgraceful, having compromised itself long ago about 15 times. And in general, it's not just unshakable, it's unapproachable. This was still on television. I don't remember in which year, maybe in 2011 or when, in Spitzer.